Hey everybody, Pinstripe here. Welcome back to my baby in that of Barnyard Blitz. Back at you again with another scrim with Mr. Revan, this time in different coloured uniforms and completely different lineups. As you'll notice, I'm going for the Gunner Para Scout Med Gren. Meanwhile, the much more conventional lineup for Revan of the Med Para Scout Sapper Gunner. So mixed as well, but he actually messes up this first turn with his own orderly, trying to get onto the metal wall to get some kind of shot, try and get some height, but the wall is doing its job and he ends up having to opt for the grenade launcher in the end onto me paratrooper. So this is kind of bringing me back nostalgically to what I used to do as a kid. I would always put gunners first or second. Of course, you know, back then, 20 years ago, I wasn't thinking about competitive hogs. I was just like, oh, he has a cool hat, therefore he should go first. But we are taking the defensive spot and almost getting the head of this pig, who is slightly positioned above the pillbox on the hill. It is indeed this paratrooper, and bearing in mind that he is going second, I was, not looking to invade. I was looking to stay on my side, get my own defensive position, and kind of put it to Revan of like, if you aren't going to grab your own pillbox, then I will, bearing in mind that my paratrooper is next. So that is what I'm going to do with that approach, in that I take my defensive position on my side, and then my second turn I invade with my own paratrooper, which is, of course, a double-edged sword, as it has always been. But Mr. Revan proving to be an AI hard mode pig at heart, just acing that bazooka shot, the airburst, and getting the near enough maximum amount of damage. But I'm going to take that airburst to his side as well, which again is a double-edged sword, because if you are bringing supplies over and that pig then dies, it is a big advantage for your opponent to then collect them and comfortably hold them for a period of time. But I'm very much in the driving seat, quite literally right now, with this shot, as the medic is the main pig on the menu, but I do get lucky as well in just clipping the gunner to get extra damage on him, hitting a mine too, but 80 damage between them is always nice and crispy. But there are targets available for the enemy scout, who is going to be looking for those poisons, and given the position of Revan's gunner and med, you can obviously tell where my eyes are focused going into these next few turns. So gaining a little bit of height on the corners is always good. You still have a little bit of protection with this high wall, but you don't want to go too close to the minefield, given the use of those AP mines in there as well. But again, the poison's coming out, the doubles inflicted as it just curves around and gets the additional hit, but my scout isn't going to be going anywhere anytime soon, so he is available to be healed by my orderly. But once more, these first 5 turns are just all focused on the medic, and that's usually how it goes. I like to prioritize the primary target. Of course, I don't want to kill him if I'm holding the MOMA, but seeing as Barnyard very rarely at this point seems to have any kind of MOMA going on, I'm not really factoring that in within this playstyle, because, as I say, my medic is going 4th and my grenadier is going last in the lineup, which is, I guess, alternative. I could categorize it as that. It has its benefits, but a lot of the time it is just easier to keep the stronger pigs higher up in the lineup, because the obvious approach, if you're on the opposite side of this, is to just use those first 4 turns to pummel those pigs that aren't even going to take their turn for quite some time. But I'm getting the trank in just to make sure that the orderly is not going to gain another turn, but bearing in mind that he's on 65 HP, that does leave him vulnerable to a high explosive grenade in order for me to gain a skip turn, which is, shock horror, exactly what I'm going to do. But Revan has a choice to make as to whether to take on the pillbox with his mortar or go for the center building, which is exactly what he goes for, and to be quite honest with you, it pays off, because look at the damage onto my scout. It does inflict a little bit of damage onto my medic, which leaves him less vulnerable for a poison skip now, bearing in mind that he is, I think, below 40 HP, but my grenadier is itching to get a shot away onto the enemy orderly. So I just need to go full power, lob it over the top of the wall, and it lands exactly where I know it's going to. And it just kind of helps having that muscle memory, knowing the range and kind of how far you can push a grenade, especially when it's looping over several walls as well. You don't want to go for the low angle because it'll bounce off it, you know, so it just comes with practice. There's no real way of defining or sort of giving hints to how you can do that. You just need to practice the range, practice the amount of power, and kind of understand that, okay, X amount of power equals this amount of distance. And it gets a little bit more complicated when you factor in height as well, because height can increase the distance it can travel. And Caster getting in the way in his blimp again and only allowing me to deal 12 damage. I guess that's kind of payoff for Revan earlier on his first turn, not being able to jump onto the wall, but I guess I'll take that damage, even though it probably would have been way more onto the paratrooper. And as he just skips over the minefield, he is taking advantage of the fact that my gunner has jumped out of the pillbox, therefore he can acquire it, and my medic is on the menu for him as he is in the sight line. The next obvious question is, what do you do to deal with this? Now, for many players, I'm sure the obvious choice would be to hop off with the gunner and then flamethrower the pillbox just to reduce its health down. 102 damage can be acquired, which will bring it down to 48 HP. Don't forget that the pillboxes on this map hold 150 compared to the default 100. But I am still looking to deal damage onto the gunner, by the way. Bearing in mind that I know his health pools and I know that he can tank some more hits before succumbing to said poison. But just going back to what I was saying, sorry, about the pillbox, the obvious decision would be flamethrower, but my decision going forward is actually to just vacate the area completely of all my pigs, bearing in mind that the medic is down. If I just remove myself from the sight line of said pillbox, it then becomes a weakness for Revan because you have the armor, but as we learned on Daybreak, it's not always a guarantee that that is going to help you in the long run, because if someone is constantly dealing damage onto you but you're staying in the same position and not dealing damage, then yeah, you can see who obviously has said advantage. But my scout is no longer going to see the light of day. He is a crispy critter and detonating literally all the mines possible. But Revan does get the poison away onto my gunner, so he is going to be a ticking time bomb, so to speak. But as I say, my plan of action is to vacate the area away from the pillbox and make it so that the paratrooper on Revan's team has to vacate the pillbox on my side. I have this strategy that I tend to do here, in that I will always jetpack onto the roof of the building, because it's just it's a strange position. Of course, it's a big height advantage, but it tends to put players off sometimes of like, wait, why are you up there? But we get a little bit of damage onto the sapper, not exactly the fullest amount that I would have wanted, but it's damage nonetheless. So now my grenadier becomes the main focal point. But having said that, when I was saying about vacating the area from the pillbox, he is technically, I think, within range of the heavy machine gun. I could be wrong. Maybe the building blocks most of the shot, but bearing in mind that I've moved him closer to Revan, therefore he is now in range of that shot. He actually overthrows, and you'll notice that he dealt 8 damage onto his own gunner. So he is now going to gain me a skip. That was very much appreciated. You could see he was going for the high angle, trying to get the extra pieces onto my Gren, which he does. It was still very much a solid 50 or /40 odd, bearing in mind that my Gren is now down to 81. And I have vacated the premises completely from the pillbox, so there is no longer a sight line on any of my pigs on my side, but I actually moved this scout closer to me, dealing 68 damage in total, but gaining that skip turn thanks to the overthrow from that shrapnel. So the damage will continue onto the sapper, seeing as the pillbox on this side, which is technically Revan's side, doesn't have a sight line anywhere else, and just missing my own grenadier there. That could have been terrible, but full HP, full armor pillbox, no shot to be had for Revan, so he's got to jump out and find another way around. We've touched on it many times before in previous videos, but this matchup is effectively the best example of when the Pillbox is at its weakest. When you don't have a sightline, this is where it kind of shines quite well in providing defensive cover on Barnyard, because anyone that comes over and ends up sitting within view of said Pillbox, in this case both Revan's paratrooper and scout are in the sightline of said Pillbox, and because he couldn't see me, he vacates it, but that will allow my gunner to then jump back in later on, which is exactly what I'm going to do, because my focus is always on gaining armor wherever possible. But we both switch sides. He has the majority of pigs on my starting side, and it's vice versa. My Gren and my other pig are on this side, but I feel it's best to just completely vacate the rest of Revan's pigs, in this case the single sapper on this side with the high explosive grenade. It takes him out, and that now draws it down to a 3v2. Now, bearing in mind I have the armor on this side as well, which I'm going to hold on to because I don't have a sightline in that other Pillbox. But it's not going to matter to me because, well, as you'll see when this game goes on, the poison is coming out, which means that he is looking to get the hit onto my Grenadier. But luckily for me, the wall and indeed the building are going to do its job, as the lack of power pushes it into the center of the building, but I am standing far enough away that the poison cloud isn't going to do the job that is intended. So getting a cheeky head jump on the para, I then return to my rightful place within the Pillbox to maintain the usage of those heavy machine guns and get another hit onto the paratrooper. The choice here is quite obvious given the health pool of said para. 137 is going to be dropping him down to 97. Sadly, on this occasion, not getting the double hit. That would have been nice, but as you can see from the bar, I am slightly ahead, purely based on the amount of pigs that I still hold. Of course, Mr. Revan is going to have something to say about that, again turning on his AI cheats, just embodying the AI player that he was meant to be, and patiently waiting for the blimp to get the hell out of the way because, well, we've already destroyed it once. Caster, if you could kindly move the blimp out of the way, that would be very nice for Revan, and he is going to ace this next shot and effectively take down my Grenadier. But he did his job, he did the damage onto that sapper, so he can die happy, I suppose. But that brings it down to a 2v2, and bearing in mind that my gunner is slowly losing health over time, this is where I decide to try and get a better shot onto said para once more, because I do know the health pools of the enemy scout. He is basically one hit away, roughly within the 40 to 50 HP range. So again, my aim is purely onto the para, dealing 49 damage. In fact, he's on 72. What are you even talking about, Pin? You know the health pools. I call bullshit. But either way, Revan again is trying to get the right angle by jumping onto the wall to get a shot directly onto my para, who is standing on top of said Pillbox. And finally, he does indeed ace it, jumping across and hitting me with the sniper rifle. Although, in the long run, it might have been more beneficial to go for the poison gas in that instance, given that, like I say, my gunner is slowly losing health over time. But this is then where I turn my attention onto the scout, seeing as he now has the most HP, and that will then drop him down to 32 and make it so that both of these pigs are now one shot away from being taken down. So I'm quite surprised really that my gunner has lasted the entirety of this game, bearing in mind that he is going first, but I guess it just shows the prioritization of the important pigs. You know, my Gren and my medic are long gone at this point, but so is Revan's turn pretty much, because he has indeed attempted to nudge my para from a great height off of the Pillbox, but it doesn't work out too well. But he is then going to take the Pillbox. But to me, that's completely fine, because again, I'm going to use the same strategy of just vacating the area and not providing him with any kind of sightline. And given that the scout is still alive over here, the obvious choice is just to take him down and bring it into a 2v1. And I have a rocket launcher which will do the job, so I'm going to put it down to that. And then basically it's going to be a case of trying to get Revan in my sights once more, because I do also hold another rocket launcher with my gunner as well. That's kind of the ace up the sleeve in a way that I've been holding on to for quite some time, and it will pay off as this video eventually draws to a close. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Barnyard is perhaps the main place to bring a varied lineup, to bring an alternative point of view. I'm not saying that bringing a Medic and Gren 4th and 5th is beneficial, because it does have its major downsides. But as with every practice game and every scrim, I would highly recommend that you get a bit creative, try and move away from the MoMA as much as you can on maps where it's not really viable. And yeah, I'll leave you guys with the rest of the gameplay, but let me know your thoughts on everything in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys later for the next one.
Where's destination going?
Yeah.
I'm going. Where's destination going?
Slam. When I hit you up, I'm talking about banging something. Chill off in your crib and have a thing, probably make a sting or something. Girl, you like my bottom bitch. Post my bill, pay for my lawyer.